Steven Universe is a show that got me into animation. I mean, obviously I watched cartoons before, but it wasn't until Steven Universe that I began to watch entire seasons of shows, or keep up with a fandom, or check online when new episodes were coming out. And when I was first watching the show, one character immediately stood out to me. From the onset, this character appears to be just a classic animal sidekick. I mean, he doesn't even have a name. But as the show goes on, Lion slowly becomes the centerpiece for Pearl and Steven's arc regarding Rose. And that's what I want to talk about in this video, some of the storylines that surround the pink feline. I'm going to cover 4 episodes for the sake of this video: Lion 1, Lion 2, Lion 3, and Rose's Scabbard. I know there is a Lion 4, but it doesn't really fit in the same arc as these 4 episodes and is 3 seasons later, so while it is fairly interesting to talk about, it doesn't really belong in this video. Anyway, despite their short length, I have a lot to say about some of these episodes, so let's go ahead and get into it.
No, no, no!
First up is the aptly named Steven's Lion. This episode is the 10th of the series, and you can definitely tell. Besides the rougher animation and the more juvenile style of comedy, Steven's depiction alone should be enough to tell you that this is true Season 1A material. And that's not really a bad thing either, as I think it does a good job to show an untraumatized Steven. Anyway, I don't really want this video to become about the evolution of the show's characters, so let's focus back onto this episode, which is really one of the strongest of the show's first dozen. Lion's introduction is pretty horrifying, but the show quickly transitions to showing Lion in more of a buddy role. The animation is really effective in showing how Steven and Lion share a similar vibe. I mean, their connection is pretty obvious from, Lion being pink, but it's not really until Lion follows Steven home that it becomes clear that this isn't just a wild beast. Lion and Steven hanging out is filled with great bits, whether that be Lion's reaction to Steven's antics or the townie's reaction to Steven and Lion's antics.
I'm ordering for 2. Steven's pregnant?!
The episode is pretty consistently funny. The highlight of the episode is at the end though, with some of the most impressive action of early Steven Universe. The fantastic color scheme mixed with cinematic score create a beautiful backdrop for the fight, and for his first appearance, the choreography surrounding Lion is pretty fantastic. And that's pretty much the episode. Obviously this one, as well as the next one to an extent, work to establish that Lion is both drawn to Steven and connected to Rose before the bombshells of Lion 3 and Rose's Scabbard. It's lighthearted, it's funny, and it's just generally a good episode, even if it's not an all-time classic for the show.
Lion, I want you to take us to the movie.
Lion 2, the movie, is another good but not great episode. There's a lot to enjoy here, but the episode fails to really come together to be fantastic or anything. It's not something I really want to focus on in this video, but the Connie stuff is good in this one, continuing the trend of Season 1. It's just refreshing to see Connie kind of represent the audience as a normal person witnessing Steven's wacky world. Connie kind of loses this as she becomes further entrenched in the main plot of the show, but it's a nice dynamic while it lasts. The Lion shenanigans are less fun than last time, but it's still cute to see Connie and Steven goof around in the training temple. The action is definitely weaker than last time though. The episode doesn't really have any great fights, as the Ocarina of Time fight against the turret ends before it really has time to ramp up. The episode continues a lot of the fun lion gimmicks from before, throws in some Connie and Steven, and sprinkles in some lore for good measure. While this episode is a fun romp filled with memorable gags, its real significance is definitely further showing Lion's connection to the crystal gems. It's a fun episode, but another not really all-time classic.
I don't know what this place is, but it feels familiar.
I know the last 2 sections have been really short, but trust me, I have a lot to say about Lion 3 straight to video. The first 8 or so minutes are pretty standard for the show. I mean, there's definitely some foreshadowing of the big finale, like Sadie complaining that her mom still packs her lunches, but it all just largely feels normal. In fact, it's almost odd how there really isn't a plot. Besides Steven pining that he wishes that he knew more about his mother, it's really just a standard day for Steven. The jokes during this episode are some of the best of the season though. The cut from the peaceful dream realm to Lion suffocating Steven is hilarious, and so is Pearl's confession that she watches him sleep. Steven's dream is funny, and I don't really think I'll ever get tired of seeing Lion stuff Steven's face into his mane. Anyway, eventually Steven gets the message, and after miraculously ignoring the gem, chest, and sword, he grabs the tape. And that's pretty much the episode. Overall, it's another funny one, but...
Steven, we can't both exist.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the tape scene, which only hits like a ton of bricks. I don't even know how to put words together to describe my thoughts on this scene, but here we go anyway. It's definitely inspired by the ending scene of Speak Like a Child from Cowboy Bebop, although I would struggle to call it a parody. It's actually kinda odd, as despite being very similar scenes structurally, they elicit vastly different emotional responses. Faye's tape is sad, as the viewer sees what Faye was like before she was hardened from a life of crime, and Faye cries at what she has no memory of. Rose's tape is more bittersweet. It hits hard, but not necessarily because it's sad, but more because Steven finally gets to see his mother. This effect is mitigated a bit by the show's decisions later on to paint Rose as a morally misguided figure, but for now it works pretty well. So much about this scene is perfect. The show lands it perfectly, keeping Steven and Sadie silent while it plays, and the decision to play Rose's voice and showing Greg before showing her face works really well, and the writing to show the chemistry between Rose and Greg works really well. A Tumblr post by Rebecca Sugar shows that initially Greg was supposed to record Rose, but reversing this decision was definitely the right move. It's really clever to have Rose be the one recording because the tape itself works as evidence towards Rose's fascination with humans, and it's just so good. The tape does a fair amount to show Rose's philosophy regarding humanity and sets it up to be expanded upon in Greg's pair of flashback episodes later in the series. The episode doesn't let up after the tape finishes either, as the music kicking in works as the episode's final gut punch. Steven hugging Lion and Sadie calling her mother just works so well to bookend the episode, and while perhaps some dialogue after with Steven asking why Lion has Rose's stuff would have been nice, there's no denial that ending the episode like this works. The first 8 minutes of this episode are great, but the last 3 are immaculate. This is the 35th episode of the show, and I think it's the best one up until this point. Besides just being a joy to watch, this episode also fully establishes that Lion used to belong to Rose, even if it doesn't fully announce it. It leaves enough up to interpretation that while the audience knows, it's definitely reasonable that a kind of dumb season 1 Steven wouldn't. Anyway, I could go on and on about this scene for the rest of time, but we still have another episode to get to. But yeah, this episode is fantastic, and honestly a candidate for the best episode of season 1. Well, at least it would be, if it wasn't for...
Well, I think you're pretty great.
Rose's Scabbard should have been Lion 4. I mean, come on, the first 3 Lion episodes perfectly build up to the reveal that Lion is at least connected to Rose, and they really stop the naming convention as soon as we get to the consequences of this revelation. Anyway, this is my favorite episode of season 1. I can definitely see an argument for a few other episodes, but this is the one I come back to the most. Anyway, I shouldn't get ahead of myself, so let's start with the beginning of this episode. The Lion and Steven stuff is still hilarious, especially when they add in Pearl's hatred for the feline. This episode begins showing Pearl's unhealthy obsession with the past rather quickly. Seriously, Pearl glamorizing war is kinda horrific, and her reactions border on manic throughout this entire episode. This episode does feel a bit slow if the viewer realized before that the sword from Lion 2 belonged to Rose. This is all kind of a result of something that plagues all of season 1, which is that Steven never talks to anyone about anything. Things that happen to Steven in an episode are never brought up again, on or off screen. I mean, Steven presumably never mentioned the tape or the flag or the photo in Lion's Mane to any of the gems, and he literally never mentions the chest or the gem. Anyway, if I get any more negative, it might indicate that I don't love this episode, which is definitely not what I'm trying to say. Garnet's and Amethyst's reaction to Pearl's outburst is tragic, showing how numb they have become to her trauma. Garnet's silence is a powerful ending to the scene, and I love how they reuse the battlefield. The way the difference in light changes the entire atmosphere of the field is really impressive, and the chase afterwards works really well. Letting Steven endanger himself is the exact opposite of Pearl, showing how disconnected from the real world that she is from the realization that she wasn't Rose's complete confidant. Anyway, just like Lion 3, this episode ends with a 3-minute gut punch. If you've seen the episode, you know what I'm about to mention, but this is perhaps peak Steven Universe.
Sometimes, I wonder if she can see me through your eyes. What would she think of me now?
Well, I think you're pretty great.
The montage afterwards is mostly remembered for its incredibly great music, and it is incredibly great music, but I think its best attribute is its decision in ending the episode. Right at the end of the montage, right as the music begins to close, Pearl's face remains shocked. Any other show would have had her smile, but this episode instead chooses to emphasize that while Pearl may be temporarily okay, she's still not over her trauma. I mean, Pearl had her millennia-long perception of her relationship with Rose shattered, so it makes sense that she wasn't a single hug away from being healed. revealed. This episode is fantastic. Again, now I know I'm just repeating myself at this point, but it's just the perfect follow-up to Lion 3. This obviously isn't the end to Pearl's arc regarding her past with Rose, so there are follow-up episodes like Mr. Greg and A Single Pale Rose, but I'm gonna leave those for a different time. All 4 of these episodes make up Lion's main arc in the show. After this point, he's mainly just relegated to Steven's steed, as he is rarely a focal point in any episode. These 4 episodes range from good to fantastic, and chronicle Steven discovering more and more about Lion's connection to Rose Quartz and how it ultimately impacts Pearl. I had a lot of fun going back through these episodes, and while I only covered 4 in this video, I found myself casually watching a bunch of different episodes while running this video. It reminded me of how, despite some shortcomings, Steven Universe is still filled with great episodes and moments, and the show's emotional core is still easily its strongest attribute. And that's gonna be pretty much it for me. Thanks for making it this far, and if you have an idea for what I should cover next, you can leave it in the comments or tweet it at me. Either way, this has been Ample Samuel, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.